All right, Nurses on Fire. I am honored to have Emma Geiser joining us to talk about her story of debt freedom. Hey, Emma.
Hello.
So, Emma, let's start off by talking about how you got into nursing.
I think I was destined to be a nurse. My entire family is in the medical field, and I honestly tried to avoid it as hard as I could. I really didn't want to get into it, but I knew I was good at science. So I ended up getting a psychology degree. And while I was obtaining that degree, I got a job in a local ER. The sister told me a good way to make money. And so I was a unit clerk. I really liked it. And something just clicked while I was doing that job that I realized, you know what, this is really where I'm supposed to be. It's not a cop out if I follow my family's footsteps. And now I'm celebrating 10 years as a nurse.
Wow. Isn't it funny that we think that it's a cop out because it's something that we know, even though once you get into nursing, you're like, how the heck did I think that this was a cop out? This is like the hardest thing ever.
I'm such a millennial. I was worried about being predictable, not unique.
Oh God. And so I were you more interested in like making less money to pursue creative passions?
I honestly had no other avenues since nobody in my family does anything other than medicine. I'm like, I don't know how to make money. I'm going to have to become a nurse.
Well, I'm so glad your sister recommended you become you worked in the ER as a tech or what were you doing?
I was a unit clerk.
Oh, unit clerk. That's so cool.
Hmm.
That's so
I
cool.
still stand that that's my best job I've ever had.
You know what? I think that gives you really good insight without being clinical of how a nursing unit works, especially ER. ER is freaking crazy. One of our unit clerks just graduated and got her and passed her NCLEX, so she's an official nurse. And so I know she's going to make a phenomenal nurse whenever she gets that first job. But yeah, I think that it gives you so much just understanding that you can't get if you've never worked in the medical profession. And even like before I became a nurse, I was in like healthcare administration, and I don't think I would have gotten the insight that the same insight that a clerk would have gotten because I never did the day to day admitting and you know what I'm saying, like transitioning people through their levels of care and things like that. So I think that that's great. So moving
There's,
on,
oh,
yeah.
I was just going to say, there's so much value in being able to page your own physician.
Yes, yes. And especially at night, it's just like you need to know how to get in contact with people and not have to apologize too. Be like, listen, we need this. And that's what's up.
Hmm.
So you've been working as a nurse for 10 years. At what point did you reach what you state is a level of burnout?
Can you repeat that? It skipped
Okay.
right when you were asking
I bet it
the
did.
question.
My stinking computer. So you so you've been a nurse for 10 years. At what point was it that you reached a level of burnout, as you stated when we talked earlier? Mhm,
It really started around year two as a
mhm,
nurse.
mhm,
I had gotten over that hump of being a new grad. Things weren't as exciting anymore because I no longer was just trying to survive. And I was just trying to figure out where I fit in. And I started to realize that it didn't have much to do with fitting in so much as that I just wasn't coping with everything going on. And it's still hard to explain what that all means, but it's just this overall flooding sense that you get all of a sudden. I have this moment that I remember being in the ER in the back hallway, standing at the ice machine. And I stood there, looked to my left, and I could see the ambulance bay doors. I was like, man, if I just walk out right now, would anybody remember? Like, would they know? Would they care? Like, so that was when I realized that something probably needed to change. But like anything, I struggled for a while longer before I finally did anything about it.
when did it like click that it was more or less your finances that was kind of getting you to that place of burnout?
It didn't click until I was probably a few months into my student loan payoff journey. I had stumbled upon personal finance information through family members. My brother-in-law is an ER physician, and he was working to pay off his student debt. And so through him, I learned about some things, and I knew with my income, I could do it. So it kind of became a new pet project for me to pay off my loans, because I
Hmm.
looked at my cash flow and realized that I didn't have much leeway going on to do fun things and buy fun stuff. Even though it really wasn't there. And I want those choices and opportunities in the future. So I decided, why the heck not? I'll throw my extra income at paying off my student loans. And a few months into that, all of a sudden I had a purpose and work became more enjoyable. I realized slowly that if I wasn't dependent on work because they were paying for my life, then it was more enjoyable for me to show up and care for people.
I love that. I love that. I feel like that is so underrated. And a lot of times we don't get it until we really get it. That the way that you show up at work when you are stressed about money is totally different when than when you have financial freedom. And it's tangible how much um I'm struggling to find the words, but how much you just feel like you're able to really focus on what you're there to do as opposed to having to make a living or having to meet a certain financial obligation. It's so freeing because you can fully be in who you are as a nurse without having to worry about all these other considerations that might come into play because you're going to work for financial reasons. And so I love that you said that because that's why I do what I do, so that we can fully be in who we are as nurses, because that's why we got into the field. That's why we ultimately became nurses, because we love serving our patients. But there's something to be said about the capacity to serve when you're worried about financial stress. So, yeah, I love that.
It was really nice to realize that if I needed to, because work was becoming too much, I could take a step back and I could work less and show up more, or I could take a break without it affecting my entire personal life.
So, how much debt were you able to pay off and how long did it take you?
So I had $46,000 in student loans. And when I finally got serious about paying them off, it took me 16 months, which just serendipitously happened to be the same amount of time I was in school for nursing.
I love it. I love it. But when most people think about paying off student loans, they think about being in debt for the rest of their life. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that is phenomenal. But it also speaks to the fact that once you really get intentional about whatever it is financially, paying off debt, saving, investing, once you really get intentional, on average, I find that most people hit their goals within like this 2 year period. I don't know what it is about being like close to 2 years on average, like a little bit under, a little bit over most of the times. But once you really get intentional, no matter what, how much debt you have, like for me, my student loan debt was $200,000, but it's all relative,
Oh
right?
my gosh.
Yeah, exactly. But it's all relative, right? So it took me about 2.5 years to pay off my debt. And so it's all about intentionality. It's all about really focusing on that one thing and getting that momentum and then having that purpose, right? And so I really find that all it takes is just the willingness and then putting the action behind it. So congratulations on paying
Thank
off your
you.
debt. Where like having paid that off, where are you now financially?
I am in a really good place. I fully am still growing and learning and finding new things. And it's really become a passion. But that first step of tackling the student loans really just morphed then into what's next. Like,
Mhm.
what can I do to make sure that I am set up and that my husband's set up if anything happens to me, things like that. And I really worry about little grandma me now. I didn't used to care. And now I'm like, okay, how's that retirement going? Do I have life insurance? What are my best areas to invest? And how can I simplify it so it's just happening for me?
I love that. You get to focus on your future self instead of just living to pay off debt, like living to pay off your past mistakes. And then I want to take a step back because I need to ask you, what steps did you employ to pay off your debt?
Ah, so I actually love talking to nurses about paying off debt, mostly because we have such an amazing capacity to up our income if we want to.
Yes, yes.
And doing it, knowing that it's a temporary thing, is also very motivating to bring in extra income as a nurse. So once I started getting some, like, really got a budget together, found all the extra money I could, I was motivated enough that I wanted to get a second job. So I started working as a CCT nurse. And through that, I was working a lot of hours, waking up really early at like 3:30 in the morning, but it didn't feel like a struggle because I had a purpose. And I always knew at the end of that goal, I was going to step back to doing normal things. Like I'm not a huge fan of the hustle.
Hmm.
And this was all to improve my lifestyle. And if I could temporarily up what I was doing to make things happen faster, I was totally willing to make that happen.
I love that. I love it. And I love like the flexibility within nursing that we have, that we can scale up and scale down typically in most positions to meet financial goals. If we're really intentional about it, a lot of times people just do it to, buy a purse
Yeah. Yeah,
or things
had
like that.
no I did not want my lifestyle to inflate to the amount I was working. I knew it was not sustainable, but it could happen for a short-term period to make my life way better.
Right. And I love that you mentioned that because it is lifestyle inflation. But lifestyle inflation isn't like something that we do typically intentionally, right? It's just that, the more that you make, it's like, oh, yeah, oh, well, I could afford a nicer car. Oh, yeah, well, I could afford a nicer home. But these are the things that are expected. So it doesn't seem like it's something that you're not supposed to be doing. It just seems totally normal. So thanks for mentioning that
I
lifestyle
have to
inflation because
share that I have always driven BMWs. And
that's okay.
the entire time I was paying off my debt, my air conditioning was out in my car and I refused to fix it. So I drove to work with my windows down every day. And it was hot.
I bet.
That's probably the most struggle I endured to pay off my loans. Like, that's as hard as it got. I
So
have
I love
no
it.
difficulty admitting that.
So in order to pay off your debt, you basically increased your income. Did you use anything else to help you?
No, I had a little bit in savings.
Hmm.
So I pulled that down by a few $1,000s to get things moving initially. Like, aside from my student loan debt, I had a small amount of credit card debt. It was probably a couple grand. And then I also had a $10,000 loan to my dad because he helped me with a down payment on a house. And so I also paid all that off in that time period. But the student loans are really what I'm proud of.
Wow, wow. You were able to accomplish a lot in a short time period. So, any kind of budgeting techniques you use to help you prioritize your money, where it was going?
I was fully a pen and paper person
Wow.
until I got married, and then two people were involved. So I was all about the notebook. I still have it. I'm not a saver in memento sense, but I still have that book. And I created a zero-based budget so that I really knew I was maximizing what I could do, because if I wasn't maximizing my efforts, it wasn't worth all the extra work I was doing.
And can you briefly explain for the two people out there that haven't heard me say it a million times what a zero-based budget is?
Of course. So a zero-based budget is when you give every single dollar that you make a job. So I would line up exactly how much money I was bringing in, and I'd then write down exactly where it was going. Nobody got to run away and just do its own thing.
I love it. And you do that in advance. So zero-based budgeting and increasing your income, making sure that every one of those dollars in an assignment is assigned is how you knocked out that debt in 16 months.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I still went on vacation. I just planned it
Yes.
in my zero-based budget.
And that's what, thank you for bringing that up again too, is that a lot of people think that budgets represent deprivation, but it's just a spending plan. It just tells your money where to go. A big thing for me when I was paying off my debt is making sure that I still spent quality time with my daughter. And because my daughter is spoiled, that quality time was at Disneyland every other month. And so I just budgeted that in. And so, you still get to live, but it also is really freeing because the way that people typically live is that they don't plan things and they spend their money on little things like here and there at Target or, just fast food going out. And then they don't have the money at the end of the month or when they really need it for the things that they really want to do. And so now you're letting money dictate how you are living your life instead of the other way around. And once you can reverse that relationship, you have true freedom over your life. So I love it. I love it. Yes. And I
That's so
use
important.
zero-based budget too. Yeah.
My husband and I every year have a meeting where we list our top values for the year for what we want to be doing and spending money on it. And we make sure that those get hit first. And if there's something that sneaks in that's not as important, we kind of check each other and say, hey, we weren't planning on really doing that because we want to do this instead. And it's really fun when you get to do the things then that you wanted to be doing,
I love that.
like
And
Disneyland.
yeah, like Disneyland. But a lot of people ask, like, how can they get their partner on board especially if you come from different financial backgrounds, you don't think the same financially. What do you think the key is for that?
So I got lucky. I got to mine early when I was in college. So he knew there was no other option when he saw me starting my debt payoff. And he got interested. Like, we were in a partnership. He loved me. He was interested in what I was doing, what mattered to me. And I think that's really important. He knew this mattered so much to me that even though he didn't totally understand it yet, he was willing to give it a try. And now that we've been doing this for so long together, he's really on board with it too. And I think
Oh,
that's
hold on
really,
one
oh,
second.
no worries.
Girl, what happened?
I was messing with that thing, with that.
How did that happen? You're supposed to be watching her.
I know, but I didn't know how to spell yellow.
You didn't know how to spell yellow. That's what you was coming to tell me?
Yeah.
You came and talked to me about your homework. You didn't say nothing about Aya's. Anyway.
But at first, when I saw her like that, I wanted to bring her to you. And I didn't know she was like that.
Okay, can you put that? Oh my God. No, she's getting it in her eye. She just, it's like a tub of like coconut butter, mango butter. Like, it's for my hair.
She's shiny.
She is super shiny, right? It's all in her mouth, all on her clothes.
Oh,
sorry,
no.
My co-stars are here. Yes, you can have Capri Sun. Okay, so I'm gonna have to keep her here. If she makes noises, I'll probably mute her. But my babysitter fell through.
It happens.
Do you have kids?
No.
Oh.
I've got little kids that live next door and they harass me at every moment.
Well, this is what my life is. This is my life for me. Anyway, she'll probably go to sleep now because she's well oiled. And I cut you off, and I'm sorry, I don't remember what you were saying.
No, I
was
started
distracted.
to kind of trick. I could tell Disappy.
Okay. All right. Let's us transition into your ability. So your debt is all paid off. You're in a good position. Now you're planning for your future self. What are you doing now in your nursing career?
I have transitioned away from the bedside. And that was truly something that I was able to do because of getting my money together. if many people who are listening are bedside nurses and don't know this, when you transition away from the bedside, it typically comes with a pay cut. One of my biggest pet peeves, but it's just something that happens.
Yeah.
And I was at a point that I really wanted to try something new, and I saw an opportunity pop up, paid less. I was able to transition, and it didn't affect my lifestyle at all because I wasn't tied to all of these debt payments. So I now am working remotely in a separate state from the hospital I work in, and it's amazing. I've learned after the fact that I'm actually doing geographic arbitrage. I didn't know this term before I moved. We moved because of my husband's work, but I actually live in a state now that has no income tax, and I still work for a state that has high cost of living. So I'm able to earn that income, but live in a lower cost of living area. And it's been a fun ride. I would definitely recommend it. Didn't plan it at all, but it's totally worked out for me.
So have your hours that you have to work per week reduced?
No, I still work 40 hours a week.
Okay. But you're able to take that pay cut because your expenses have dropped substantially because of where you live now.
I took the pay cut while I was still living in California, and we just made it work, because even though I was bringing in a little less money, it didn't actually affect anything we were doing. It really just affected our savings rate at that point. Everything else was covered. And then when we moved, it was just an extra bonus that I no longer had a commute. So I have basically no gas or car expenses anymore. Just like housing, so much less expensive. So it was like getting a pay raise.
I
And
love it.
didn't even
And
plan on it.
also you weren't tied down to working to like staying in a place because of your job. Like you can move wherever you want to. You can live internationally if you wanted to. Work from anywhere.
The next horizon.
The dream.
Only in the fire community does everybody look at expat living.
Exactly. So what are some money mistakes that you've made?
Oh man, I've made a few. So back in college, I got a store credit card. This is probably my first big money mistake. I got a store credit card and I didn't understand anything about interest rates, minimum payments, statements, nothing. I was totally oblivious. I just knew that I got gift certificates if I spent a certain amount of money. So I dragged this $2,000 in credit card debt along for a while just because it didn't make sense to me. I didn't know that if I just got rid of it, I'd be good. And it did stress me out, but I really was lost. I had no clue that that was actually what the problem was. So that was my first big mistake. And I'm very vocal about making sure you pay your credit cards off every month now.
Mm-hmm.
My second big mistake, which is more of I actually have three. Okay, so I have three to tell you. So my second one that worked out in my favor, but it could have gone horribly wrong because I did not understand it, was that my private student loan had a variable interest rate. And that worked out like me, who took out loans around 2010 with the way interest rates have gone, but it also could have gone opposite if the Fed had raised interest rates. So I got lucky because I was able to pay it off and have a very low rate, but I recognize now that I definitely played with the lottery since I didn't understand what it was at the time. My third big mistake is putting money in my Roth IRA and forgetting to invest it.
So let me share why that's a big mistake, because people are like, but you put money into your Roth IRA. But a Roth IRA is just a house for that money. It has to be put into a room. It has to be
really good
invested.
example.
Yeah, so it has to go somewhere. So there's different rooms, right? So typically when you drop money into an account like that, it goes into basically like a money market account. It's like a savings account, but like a little bit higher interest rate. But in order for you to invest it, which is the goal for it being in an investment account, it has to be actually put into investments. And so
got halfway there, but not quite.
So for anybody that didn't get that, it kind of went over your head. Don't feel bad. If you don't know much about investing, it's a common mistake. But now you know. So make sure that your money is actually invested when you put it into an investment account.
Luckily, I already had an investment plan. I just transferred it, and then I got busy and I didn't have it on automatic. So I had to go back in, and it took me a little bit, shocked when I logged in and went, oh no, I have so much in cash. What happened?
And I can't say that that hasn't happened to me either. So don't feel bad. Don't feel bad. So you love sharing your story about debt payoff, budgeting, and all those kind of things. Talk to us about where you share that and who you share that with.
So I have an Instagram account, and I also have a website. I like to operate under the name Nurse FERN online. It's a little bit cheeky, but having been a former ER nurse, I always associated it with the acronym that shall not be named. But one day, I just thought Financially Enlightened Nurse. Like, I'm very sarcastic. If you know me, you would laugh if I said that to you. And it just kind of this thing and go online. I had been operating under my name, and I was working as a financial coach, and things just weren't clicking in that arena. And when I started really focusing on nurses and just embraced this new fun thing that I was enjoying, that's when everything started to work.
I love that. Financially enlightened nurse, just like financially intentional. The Fern. That's so dope. I'm not that creative.
And every once in a while, it took years for that to actually happen.
Oh, what question do you hear nurses asking over and over again when it comes to their finances?
There's two. People want to know how to start investing, and they want to know the quickest way to make the most money.
Yeah, and I also hear the less risky way too, without having to
less risky, quickest. And then student loans usually filter in eventually in the questions, but it usually starts with the investing and making money.
Well, I'm glad that at least people are more interested in investing. A lot of times it's not really on our horizon until a little bit later, a little bit too late for some people. So I'm glad you're seeing that more people are interested in talking about that. And
I just think it's so cool because then if you ask if they have the company 403B or 401k, and if they're getting the employer match, usually people say yes. And then it's just really fun to tell them that they actually are already investing. And then they get really excited and smile.
I love that. I love that. See, you start off by giving them a win.
Yeah.
That's great.
It's the fun win.
Yes. All right. So for a new nurse starting off in their first job, what's the best thing that they can do financially?
I really think it is to immediately sign up for your benefits, because it is usually an afterthought when you go to the healthcare orientation, your hospital one. It's kind of just thrown in there like, oh, hey, by the way, make sure you log on to your benefits portal. And you're like, what the heck is that? And sign up for this. And you're like, I've never signed up for a retirement account before. What does that even mean? You usually end up calling dad. Maybe you get questionable advice there. Maybe you get good advice. And it can just be so confusing that people just don't do it. Or they don't seek out sources because there's so much else going on with you trying to figure out your new job. And the other piece of advice I actually got from my manager when I transitioned into my new grad program. And she was just really funny because she said, I'm really excited for you. You got a job. Yay. Don't do something stupid and buy a new car.
Yep.
And year after year, I watch new grads rolling in with their brand new luxury leased vehicle. And I'm like, man, you really needed her in your life.
Yep. That's like one of the biggest things that I do see nurses doing commonly, especially after, I mean, they've making more money than they've ever seen. And so that lifestyle inflation we were talking about earlier.
I'm actually at the point now where I'm looking at reducing to one vehicle for our family,
Wow.
which is unheard of. I'd never be able to do it if I was still in California. But it is one of those things where I'm like, man, I'm really at that point where I'm looking at what is costing money that doesn't matter. And our vehicles are one of the things. Like, we just don't use them. So do we need to? Probably not.
A little singing there from Aya. Thank you for your contribution.
Just a little happy baby.
Kind of. All right. So let everybody know where they can reach out to you on Instagram and on your webpage.
So you can find me on Instagram at nurse.fern. And then my website is www.nursefern.com.
Awesome. And what kind of stuff do you share on your website?
I like to talk about all things nursing, outside of work life, everything that just affects us. And it's definitely geared towards the nursing world. It's a newer site, so I do have a little thing up there if anybody is a freelance nurse writer or wants to guest post, because I don't want it to be a one-woman show. I want everybody to be financially enlightened. So that means anybody can be Nurse Fern. It's not just me. You're welcome to borrow my alter ego.
I love it. So you guys out there, if you have some great nursing content you want to share, reach out to, now I'm going to call you Nurse Fern because I was stuck in my head, but Emily.
Power pose. I'm Nurse Fern.
Yeah. But Emma, reach out to Emma to make sure you get her on her website. Get your stuff featured on her website. Anything else you want to share before we close out?
Just a little bit of encouragement. And I'm not really the person that usually throws that out there, but I really think that any nurses can do this. There's no reason why you can't have your finances together as a nurse and be enjoying your work and your life outside of work. It's scary to get started, but there's plenty of us out there that can help you start making those first steps to get to this place.
I love it. Just change your circle of influence just a little bit. And I feel like it's so much easier to do right now with social media, Facebook groups, and all that kind of stuff. So just make sure that Nurse Fern is part of your world. Thank you so much, Emma, for joining us on the Nurses on Fire podcast. I know that a lot of the people in the community will be inspired by your story because it's totally relatable. And I love what you're doing, and I am cheering for you in your continued financial success.